Right.
Hi, I'm Bill Cannon for Criminal Lines Radio. Tonight I will be talking about post-traumatic stress disorder with my partner here, Marguerite Ashton. I'm a retired member of the NYPD. I did 27 years. I retired from Manhattan North Homicide. My entire police career, I was in enforcement roles. I was never an inside type person. So I'm very familiar with post-traumatic stress syndrome and some of the aggravators toward that, and also the life of a police officer, a member of the service, and what can be the stressful factors that can cause police suicides, can cause the type of stress that can be debilitating for officers. And after an officer has retired, what type of stress can still hit him uh, unbeknownst to himself? What may be a stressor that he's living with from something you may have seen? Uh, Most of us in the NYPD all responded to the attacks on the World Trade Center in 2001. Many are experiencing post-traumatic stress to this day from that event. So some of these things, it's important that officers talk to each other, but most of all, it's important that we put it out there front and center so that people realize they're not experiencing something that's irrational or abnormal. It's a very normal type of thing to experience post-traumatic stress. Do you have any comments on it, Marguerite?
I do. I just want to say this is I'm glad to be back with Bill. We worked together um, in the first season late last year, and so we're starting this. We switched it over to YouTube. We were on the radio, but we've went ahead and switched Criminal Lines Radio to YouTube. It has been a pleasure getting to know Bill, and we also work together on a few other projects. I'm an author and also a host. So over the last couple of years, I've been working with law enforcement and have gotten to know several people, and these are some really great guys. So tonight, this is a serious subject, and it's sort of kind of taboo, some things that you really don't talk about. Some people are embarrassed to maybe admit or to seek help for post-traumatic syndrome. So I thought this is something that would be a topic that we should discuss and make it aware and let people know, members of law enforcement, and anybody that if you think you're dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder, please seek help. So I'm ready to get going. Bill has all the information on this one, so
You flatter me.
I do want to. You are a former detective sergeant, so you were in place for a lot of it. And you had to be responsible. You had people that were under you that you had to have the knowledge and point out, or if you were told about an officer, that put a great deal of stress on you as well. So let's start off with why, how, what do you do as boss
Okay,
to get it under
Marguerite,
control?
when you're responsible for other people in the police department, they call you boss. So that's for anyone above the rank of sergeant, lieutenant, captain, you're a boss. And that means that you're not just responsible for yourself, you're responsible for a lot of people. So you have to evaluate the people that work for you, and not just how their activity is and how their performance is on the street, but how is their mental state of mind? Is the officer doing what's called a 4 to 4? Is that he works 4 to 12 and then goes out and stays out drinking until 4 o'clock in the morning? And every cop knows what that is. All of us have done it. But if it becomes habitual, then maybe there's a problem there. See, officers see things that they internalize sometimes. They may go to someone's house and there's a 5-year-old baby dead, or a baby killed by the parents, or some horrendous crime scene. And they have to go home after they worked and saw that horror, and then go home to their family and now be daddy, and put on that other hat and live that other life. And it takes a cumulative effect on many officers, especially if they don't talk about it. And I think if I can use myself as an example, I felt that I had some very positive outlets outside of police work. I had a very strong family. Um, my off-duty life was spent with my family. I wasn't out drinking all the time. Not that I was an angel. I did my share of that. But I worked out all the time, which helped me to relieve a lot of stress. I played music. I had other hobbies besides just police work. The person that I think experiences the worst psychological problems on the police department would be a single male that doesn't have a wife or a family to go home to. And from the studies, the 91% of the suicide victims on police departments across the nation are male. So it's more of a male problem than females, 91%. The other thing is
Wow.
63% are single males. And then the average age is the highest risk rate is from 40 to 44. And the time on the job, they've been on the job anywhere from 15 to 19 years. So most of the time, it's a veteran. It's not a young rookie cop. So that would indicate that that's a cumulative effect of the post-traumatic stress, at least in turning an officer toward suicide. And just the thing I'd like to point out that other professions don't have is that police officer lives with his gun 24/7. So that's also a factor that the means of destruction, the means of death is at his fingertips 24/7, 365 days a year. So if someone's feeling low, it's something that you can't reverse. You know, you pull a trigger to a gun to your head, it's irreversible. You made that decision. So therefore, prevention and education becomes the most important tool. Supervisors have to be educated. Other police officers must be educated to recognize the psychological problems that their partners may be experiencing so they can tell somebody. You know, it's the old adage, if you see something, say something. This goes together with post-traumatic stress syndrome also.
Well, and the stress is something that builds and builds, and eventually you reach your point. You guys see things that some of us don't see, and you see it every day. So there are I guess the stress levels in itself. Once you hit the streets, you already know that
Well,
this
you know,
is what's going to be.
everyone has stress. Every job has stress.
Mm-hmm.
You're a writer. I'm sure you have stress with your editor and trying to get
Under
your work
stress,
in
yes.
to write so
Mm-hmm.
many pages per day, or that's stressful.
Yeah, I know.
I'm sure they always say the hardest thing about writing is attaching the butt to the seat, right?
Put
To
your butt
just
in the
get it
street.
to start to write.
Right.
But with police stress, probably if you ask most cops, they'd say the most stress they have is from management, from their
It's for
bosses,
management.
and from the police
Oh.
department, from internal affairs, from rules and regulations. Did you have your hat on? Why are you wearing white socks? Officer, your uniform's not ironed. Uh, you have to go to court tomorrow after you just worked a 4 to 1. Now you don't really get much sleep. You got to get up now at 6 o'clock in the morning to turn around and come back to court. All those things are huge stressors, you know, and also probably not the healthiest type of shifts to work. When I was in homicide for 10 years, we did what was called a 4 and 2 chart, and we worked 2 4 to 1s and then 2 8 to 4s. So the second one, most people stayed overnight at the precinct or at the office because, or else you lost, depending on how far you lived from your job, you lost an hour on each end, so that's 2 hours more you could be sleeping. And so most people would stay overnight. Now, a lot of people would say, well, that's not great for your marriage. That's not great for this. That's not great for that. But it was, as you got older, it was important to do that to prevent the wear and tear on your body, you know, just to be able to catch a couple more hours sleep. So
Right.
that's a stressor. The other thing is that when young officers see a lot of things, and again, it's a cumulative effect. The job of a police officer is a macho type job, you know. So seeking help is sort of there's a stigma attached to it that, oh, you can't handle it, you know. And the other thing, a huge problem, it's sort of a catch-22. If an officer does seek help for a psychological problem, the first thing most police departments do is remove that officer's firearms. So now there's a big stigma attached to it. Obviously, he had his firearms removed because he's got a psychological problem. He's not allowed to do regular police work. He's not allowed to work the street. Therefore, he's not eligible for any overtime. Basically, he becomes like a switchboard operator, or he works inside the station house. And everyone knows, oh, he has no guns. They used to call him the rubber gun squad.
Oh, so it's automatically assumed that if he doesn't have his firearm.
Well, you could even have a marital problem. And a lot of times the police department, to cover themselves, if you're having marital problems, they'll call you in and they'll have you modified. They'll have your guns removed. So as if this escalates at any point, you don't have the guns to either kill yourself or kill your wife.
Right.
So a lot of police departments do that.
Okay, well, and before we go further, I just want to make sure that everybody understands that Bill and I are talking. Bill has the experience as a member of law enforcement, and that we are not dismissing the fact that a person with credentials, a psychologist or whatever, that handles this type of stuff day in and day out, and that it's their major, that this is what they do, that we know everything. We're talking to Bill. Bill is helping us understand from what he has seen and what he knows using his experience as a person in charge, and for the people that he's dealt with around. Because I have a few friends that are in law enforcement, and one is a female, and one of the things, she doesn't handle stress very well, but it was one of the things, she didn't say anything for a while, but to see everything that she did day in and day out, it was very, very stressful for her. She eventually did get the help because somebody told on her or went to their boss to let them know that she was not doing well, and she told me, she said, Marguerite, I'm glad that they did. I didn't want to do it, but I am glad that it did happen. So that stigma that sits there because you're afraid or because you don't want to be known as the one that's having problems. Were you able to, if there was anything that went on, was it just the rules for you in your
well, no, the police department actually did something very smart, and it was actually started by a line organization. It was an organization called PAPA, which stood for Police Organization Providing Peer Assistance. So if an officer was having a problem and turned himself into PAPA, became totally anonymous, they would protect the officer. They would actually voucher his guns and help him out. And if he had to go to rehab for alcohol, that's one thing people have to understand. There is no drug rehab on police departments. If they catch you using drugs, you get fired.
Right.
You just get fired. And that's, in my mind, I think that's a little bit, the police departments mirror society. People in society have alcohol and drug problems. But because drugs are illegal, the police department's position is, if you use drugs, we're going to fire you. We tell you the day we hire you, you better not use drugs. But the problem is that when they do catch someone dirty in a drug test, they fire them, and those people at a high rate commit suicide. Because if you get fired from a job and you have 18 or 19 years on, what else are you going to do? You're in your 40s. You just got fired from a job that you spent half your life in. Mm-hmm. So many people see the hopelessness of it. In fact, I believe it was last year or the year before, Governor Cuomo, with lobbying from the police unions, passed a law stating that a police officer in New York State that has over 20 years that fails a drug test will get his pension. He'll lose the job, but he will get his pension. It used to be that you lost everything.
Everything.
Every single thing. And I have sort of a funny story. When I had 26 years and 3 months on the job, I got called for a random drug test. And I couldn't help but feel like, they spun the roulette wheel and they said, oh, Cannon, let's pull him in. He's got 26. We could save a lot of money if we fire him, right? So I get to health services, and I said, all right, where do I have to give urine? Where? No, 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 no. We're gonna take hair. So I was like, oh, you're gonna take hair? Yeah, take it off my head. Oh, no, 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 no. We're gonna shave your legs. I was like, oh, this is great. This is wonderful. I get a man to shave my legs, right? But what hair goes back 6 to 9 months shows long-term drug usage. So, and then urine shows short-term. So they covered every base. Obviously, I was clean, but that didn't make me feel so good. To be called in when I had that much time on the police department, I had an exemplary career, and that they called, I almost felt it wasn't so random, you know?
Mhm.
And they called me in and like to take, shave my legs. I was like horrified.
Well, um, so the good thing is that we've got Bill telling us, so for others who are out there, that it may be something that you're nervous to speak about and go to your superiors or whatever, but for some there's this organization called PAPA. So I think it's important that we help get this information out there to let them know that it's okay. They can go to this place or to this organization and seek the help, and it's anonymous, and then they can still seek the help that they need and help get themselves on the right track. One of the things you were talking about, that it's accumulative and the stress builds and builds, and after a while, as we were talking about, it's prolonged and overwhelming. So a person's ability to cope, I guess we would say, becomes diminished, maybe. Has there been, is there maybe where someone has reached I guess maybe they've reached the extreme where it's like out of control?
Well, Marguerite, in anything, there's what's called mandatory reporters. And obviously, I was a boss. So if a cop came up to me and said, I'm going to use a fictitious name, Officer Jones is out of control, he's having some problems, I have to do something about it. I can't ignore that. I can't say, oh, he's just, he'll get over it. I have to do something about that. And it's also important to let other cops know that it's okay to reach out to a boss to try to seek help for a partner or a peer, because I've been to a lot of police suicides, and a commonality after you go and interview the officers that worked with the suicide victim was, did you notice anything? And more times than not, they'll say, yeah, he was acting crazy. He was drinking a lot, and he really was depressed. And at that point, it's like, well, why didn't you tell anybody? Not to make it all their responsibility, but if you see something like that, you should let somebody know. And I'd just like to mention that that PAPA organization, that's unique to the New York City Police Department. Other departments, they have what's called, line organizations also, whatever it could be, the Emerald Society, the Vulcan Society, the Guardian Society, any society that may represent an ethnic group of cops, the Colombian Society. Officers can turn themselves into them, and they'll sort of do the same thing. They'll protect the officer from the department. Because if the department takes your guns from you, you won't get them back probably for a year to a year and a half. But if a line organization...
Oh, that long?
Yeah, that long. If a line organization, if you surrender to them voluntarily, you may have your guns back in 2 to 3 months after you've gotten help. So they can expedite you getting back to full duty, which is hopefully everyone's goal after they've experienced problems. Look, I don't think there should be a stigma attached to having a mental health issue, because, in the private sector and everywhere else in this world, people have mental health issues, except they're not carrying a firearm. And they don't commit suicide at the level that police officers do. And they also don't see the things that police officers do that adds that type of stress. But no doubt other professions have a great deal of stress also. But the police service is unique to the amount of stress, and the fact that stress may linger for years and not raise itself. and then show up at some other time. You know, I've noticed myself, I've been off the police department for like 2.5 years, and sometimes I take great comfort in just talking to another cop, or a retired cop, or just going to see them. It's like, oh wow, they're still around, you know, like, because you're out of that world, a world that you were in for, in my case, almost 27 years. And then you're totally out of that world, and you don't see the same people that you used to work with. And so I like to see them once in a while, even if it's once a year or twice a year. It sort of gives you that level of comfort. And I don't know if that has something to do with post-traumatic stress or not, or that you just feel more comfortable around other cops sometimes. But there is definitely a level of comfort. Maybe you feel more comfortable hanging out with other writers. You have so much more in
Yeah.
common, and you like to speak
Yeah.
with each other about unique problems you have and that type of thing. And it
Well,
gives you comfort, I would imagine, right?
yeah, I think it's more if you got the whole family thing. I mean, you just kind of, you'll know automatically what the other person's going through or has a problem with if they talk to you about something. Somebody, another cop or another author or whatever would be able to solve it quicker probably than somebody else will, or they'll understand. They'll understand where you're coming from. And not only that, as like you said, so the level of stress is high in law enforcement, and just in general, in the general population, stress is everywhere. I think the danger is where it comes to with anybody, not just law enforcement, but people in general, is if you don't seek the help, and it's just laying dormant, and it's starting to build, and it's not taken care of, and you don't seek help, and that's when it becomes a problem. The whole, anything that we do or see causes stress, from serious accidents, natural disasters, um, life-threatening trauma, all that stuff. You name it, there's some form of stress attached to it. And I think that was pretty obvious for all of us on 9/11, and you were a first responder,
Yes.
correct, Bill? You
Yeah,
were.
yes, I was. And one of the I think uh, people that got an unfair amount of stress at that point was there was a class in the police academy, and they were forced out of the academy early and went right into the trenches during 9/11, and they weren't even finished with their training, and that was some baptism by fire for them to just jump right into the World Trade Center attacks. And I mean, even for myself, I saw things at the World Trade Center that I hadn't seen before in homicide, or in the homicides I responded to as a detective sergeant, and it was pretty horrendous. I worked in the morgue, not full time, but on numerous occasions right after the attacks, and I saw the conditions of the bodies that were being brought there, and the firemen and the cops that were being brought there, and it was very, very, very stressful. And
Right.
not just to the general public, was just seeing John Q. Citizen, who was working in a suit and tie that day, and all of a sudden a plane flies into the building, and that type of thing was stressful, and to see all the people that were missing relatives and that type of thing.
Right.
We worked in they had a place called the Grief Center where people would come in to report their relatives missing that they knew were in the World Trade Center, so chances are they were dead. But this year is it's the 13th anniversary. I mean,
Yes, right.
a lot of water under the bridge since then. A lot of years went by,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that that finally burying the remaining unidentified body parts near the World Trade Center Memorial and the World Trade Center Museum. DNA has come pretty far as identifying a lot of the parts that they couldn't identify. But people that had relatives there that remain unidentified, it's sort of, there's like no closure for them,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and then even we worked on the pile, actually picking up the debris and try. They thought in the beginning they thought that there were survivors, and when it turned out there were no survivors after the first few hours, that was pretty stressful too.
Yeah.
And of course we're all dealing now with our own health problems from breathing the air down there. I
Right.
I get checked out once a year by the Mount Sinai World Trade Center Health Program for asthma and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, which many people have. I think it's already the numbers of people that have died from World Trade Center cancers have surpassed the total amount of people that died from the attack.
Oh boy.
Yeah, many cops have died from the real strange cancers that they haven't seen before that are unique to the World Trade Center.
Oh. Well, my hearts go out to everyone involved. Well, let's talk about Bill. I want to. You gave. I have heard you. You've discussed it. You have discussed some positive points to use to help you overcome stress. What do you do to relieve stress? Now, you said that one of the working out, and you had your family. I mean, what would you tell to some of law enforcement officers out there who may be listening? What would you tell them yourself?
Well, the
What would
first
you
thing
suggest?
first thing I would tell them is don't become married to the job. Don't don't think that the job is the most important thing in your life. If it is, there's an expression in the police department. You love the police department, but the police department doesn't love you back. And that's true. Because as soon as you do something wrong, they'll squash you like a mosquito, you know? So don't put all your eggs in one basket and don't think, oh, I love this job, I love the police department. Have interest outside the job. More importantly, it's good to have a strong family life. Uh, I cited that statistic before that 63% of the suicide victims are single. So they're not married. They're males that are unmarried. So maybe they
Yes.
don't have someone to come home to discuss the problems they're having at work or to help relieve their stress. The other thing is to have, other hobbies, working out. It's always good to work out to relieve stress. And then, look, I'm not a exercise physiologist, but I know that exercise produces endorphins, which helps combat depression. So if you work out, chances are you won't get depressed because the endorphins that you produce when you work out combat the feelings of feeling low and feeling that type of stress. Um, the other thing is have people that you can talk to. A lot of times when you go to a real stressful situation, that might be the night you go out for a drink with your buddies and talk about, hey, that was messed up. And there's a lot to that. A lot that relieves a lot of stress. And I'm not saying you have to drink a quart of whiskey after it. I'm just
Right.
saying it might not be a bad idea to go out for a drink or two and talk about what happened. And it's almost like a support group. Because chances are, if you feel stressed or upset about what happened, your peers will also feel the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is to, most police departments have union delegates that officers can go to if they have a problem, and they'll try to keep it in-house and and if they do need help, they'll seek the help out. They're trained on how to get an officer help without basically putting them out there or putting them on blast and letting everyone know about it. So some of those things are, and just not unique to policing. I think in everyone's everyday life, it's probably a good idea to have stress relievers, to work out, to have people that you can talk to. And, unique to the police department is that the suicide rate being 1.5 times what the public is, and also that the statistics that 91% of police suicide victims are males, and out of that, 63% aren't married. So, we always blame the women for it, but it looks like the women are helping guys not, right?
Right. That's
So
right.
women are actually good in this instance, right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, I know that I enjoy, I think, exercise for me, just because sometimes even just sitting, when I do put my butt in the chair, just sitting and if the writing isn't going well or I'm working on a scene, it's the stress gets to you, and so they suggest getting up, moving, go walking. You have to detach. And so I guess that goes back to where you're saying you're not married to the job. And I am a workaholic. I will work and work and work. Right. And then sometimes it takes a moment to say, oh, I should probably go watch a movie or go read a book. You have to learn to take some you time, and I think that's important. So real quick before we go, there was a comment that came in via email. So, and this is for you to answer if you can. He's a member of law enforcement. He said a month ago there was a shooting where a teenager was killed after I told him he was going to be okay. Then I was seriously, I'm sorry, hold on. Then I was seriously hurt making an arrest a short time later and was constantly having nightmares and concentration issues, plus depression. What do you suggest I do? Do you have any positive, can you give any positive suggestions for this? I did my job. I told that the teenager was going to be okay, but then he was killed, and he was killed by another law enforcement officer.
Right. Look, I've been in probably as many stressful situations as this officer is describing. I've been to hundreds and hundreds of crime scenes. I was in homicide for my last 10 years, and when I first got there, we had 165 murders in 2002, and every year it dwindled down till the year I left in 2011. We only had 50. But I had also been in the 2-3 squad, so I saw lots of murders. And also I was in anti-crime, so I understand where he's coming from. I'm not trying to spit out my police career, but I understand where he's coming from. And if he's having nightmares and concentration issues and that type of thing, he needs to seek professional help. He really does. He needs to go to a counselor, and he needs to maybe once a week sit down with the counselor and discuss it, because that's beyond the scope of just going to work out, and beyond the scope of talking to your buddies, and beyond the scope of going out for a few drinks. I think he really needs to discuss it with a professional. And I think he can do that without, like I spoke about before, without going official through the department. He may be able to go to a department psychologist or go to a private psychologist and talk about what he's experiencing. Because, look, you never want a problem to look so insurmountable that someone would even ponder suicide. And before that thought even crosses his mind, I recommend that he get professional help. And all those other things, it's like at this point he's bleeding, so it's too late to put a little Band-Aid on it. You know what I mean? And I think he needs to seek professional help for this. And I wish him well, and I hope it works out for him. And look, all of these situations he described, no, none of them are easy to cope with mentally.
Right.
But you're expected. They tell you when you first become a police officer, you're supposed to have thicker skin than the public. But you know something, genetically, we don't have thicker skin. You know what I mean? We're not born with.
Yeah, you're still human,
we're not born with the skin of a lizard.
Right.
You acquire that from seeing horrendous things, because you can't respond emotionally to everything you see on the police department. I always remember a story where I had to, myself and a detective had to tell a woman that her 18-year-old son was just shot dead, and we had to communicate it to her, and she only spoke Spanish, and we spoke so little Spanish, we were like, it was very tough to communicate. It was almost like we're the Grim Reaper. As soon as we communicated and she understood what we said, we were the enemy after that.
Yeah.
And it was like, even though we were the messenger, in her eyes, we became the enemy because we had delivered this horrible news to her.
Yeah, and she just lost her child, so.
Right, and we understand that, but that takes its toll on you too, Like this officer's saying, he was in some horrendous situations, and he's not Superman, and mentally he has to deal with it as well as physically, and there's no shame, and there's no it doesn't mean you're weak if you seek help. It's the smart thing to do.
Well, I've got Bill. We've actually have a couple of comments that have come in that I was not expecting, but we got time for one more, and this is basically maybe something we'll have to do after the show, like maybe put in the comments section. The guy says that you stated that the organization was just for NYPD. It seems that there's no help out there for cops. Can you give us a list or make suggestions
Well,
where we can go?
most police departments have a psychological services department, right? Most large police departments.
Yes,
The,
I
the
believe
New
so.
York City Police Department, as I said, that organization PAPA is unique to the New York City Police Department, and that was more or less formed by private donations, and they're concerned, but it's staffed by volunteer cops that are still on the job but volunteer to do that, right? They may have been through the same situation. I don't specifically have areas of psychological assistance that I could recommend, like go online. There are police sites online, like cop sites that you can seek help on, but each department should have some type of psychological service that they can offer their members, especially large police departments. I know
Yeah.
police departments like Chicago right now are going through like a war zone now in Chicago. Shootings and murders are just out of control, and some of the other cities like Detroit, Newark, New Jersey, there's still a lot of these cities that are experiencing a high level of crime and a high level of violence, and that's where you get more levels of post-traumatic stress, because dealing with that type of violence and that type of danger puts a
And you
cop.
see it all the time. You're there.
Yes,
You're right in the thick of it. Yeah.
and you're in danger every night when you go to work. That's stressful too,
Right. Well, so
So
I
I'm
guess.
sorry, Marguerite. I'm just sorry I couldn't refer that person directly to anyone. I don't know what department
Oh,
they're
yeah,
from.
absolutely. And we just want to make clear, too, we cannot offer any medical advice or anything. Again, this is just coming from Bill's experience as a former law enforcement officer. But please, if you'd like, try to, maybe if you know somebody in the police department that you could speak with in private, or do research online, maybe look at the cop sites as Bill said. There has to be some help out there. So, and I'm sorry that we couldn't help you more, but make sure that you do, if this was any help at all, just make sure that you go to somebody that you feel that you can trust and see what they can do for you. Well, I think for tonight, we've had more comments come in, but we can't touch on them right now. So another time. We do have to get ready to go. Bill, it was good getting back with you here. Our schedules have been pretty hectic, but the next one we're going to do, I think we're talking probably June, though. We were talking about cyberbullying, and so that's something that we'll touch on. And there will be a couple more that I will post on our page so that you can see, so that if you have any questions or anything you'd like to get in early, we can add that throughout the show. So I think we'll go ahead and get ready to go. Bill, is there anything you want to say before we leave?
No, I just, I really feel for members of the service that experiencing post-traumatic stress, because they gave everything they had to this job, and
Right.
they're not always supported in their suffering. Specifically, I have in mind like the 9/11, the people that are suffering from 9/11, and the people that have gotten sick from 9/11. And a lot of these people have been forgotten and not supported financially. They haven't been supported psychologically, like where do they go for help when they have some of these horrendous health problems. And in that way, it's a bit of a shame. And for the people that are experiencing post-traumatic stress from any police department, I just urge that they get professional help, and there's no shame in seeking help. If you don't seek help, that's going to be shame if you take your own life and your family's left without you. So
Without you.
seeking
That's right.
help, seeking help should be the easier way to take, not the harder way.
I agree. And so I think all I have to say, just dovetail off of Bill, just that we don't realize how I did not have a clue how I knew that law enforcement was dangerous, but I did not realize the impact that it had emotionally. It's tough. I have friends who are cops, and I have some that are they do have thick. There's one that he just has thick skin, and he just will not discuss it. Um, and then I have a couple that they vent and they'll talk. And I'm not a cop, but just having somebody there to listen. So even having somebody there to just listen and have an ear also helps. So this is something to be careful about. And if you think you're going through post-traumatic stress disorder, and you're having a concern, please seek help. And we'd like to thank you for joining us here tonight on Criminal Minds Radio. We will be back again, and we'll keep you updated. If you do have any questions that you would like to send me or Bill, please post it on the page. And I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. It was good to see you again, Bill.
It's great to see you, Marguerite. It's always fun to do these shows.
All right.
If we can help anyone with what we do, it was worth it, right?
Absolutely. You're right. All right. Everybody have a good night.